Okay, so I apologize. I did end off on a cliffhanger last episode, but we are going to continue, I promise, right where we left off. So let's keep going. There was grass as far as she could see. She didn't have the slightest idea where she was. She was in a forest alongside Narita just moments ago, and she couldn't begin to understand how she ended up in a place like this. A blue sky and a green sea stretching out into the horizon. A gentle wind was caressing her cheeks, and the smell of grass and dirt tickled her nose. Beige, silky hair fluttered in the wind. The fields were waving like a calm sea. Far off in the distance, far beyond the horizon, there was a straight tower reaching directly into the sky. It was made of gold. The tip was above even the clouds, and she couldn't even see it if she tried. She realized how puny she was. This wide world made her aware of her insignificant size. No matter how harsh and cruel one's life was, it was fleeting before this vast field of green. This vacuum-like silence pierced her like a knife. The next moment, she realized that there was a silhouette before her. She didn't know where it had come from, but it was notably small. It had no eyes or nose, as though its head was covered in cloth. It was dark and hazy all throughout, and its outline occasionally shook as if attacked by white noise. It seemed like a jester. It slightly shivered left and right like a clockwork machine. She felt like she spoke about something very important before coming here, but she couldn't remember the details. Her heart was full of anxiousness, as if it was about to enter a place she wouldn't come back from. Where did she want to go? What desire did she want to fulfill? I don't know, sounds like she's putting way too much on herself, because I'm like, why do you keep going back to your onslaught syndrome? Like, surely you have better control of your emotions than this, right? I mean, I feel like onslaught syndrome is probably something you can't really necessarily control per se, but you gotta start believing in yourself. And, stop putting so much on your plate. You don't have to do it all, That's not what being noble means. Now I'm curious what happened to our land. I don't know, that's just how humans are. I mean, I don't know what you're expecting. The jester sung. I mean, I hope you're not trying to protect them by getting onslaught syndrome. I mean, that's not gonna help. She was embraced by a feather-like warmth. Embraced by the jester's many hands that shone green, she drowned in a peace she hadn't experienced since she was born. She felt as though she returned to the womb, where there was no fear or grief. In the cold yet bright field, she voiced a prayer. Well, Mitori, I'm glad you took out the helicopter, but I kinda need you to be sane, okay? You doing whatever in the world you're doing isn't gonna help us. I left Mitori where she was and reflexively went 8 meters back. My instincts could smell death, and they were telling me that I would have died if I stayed there. Mitori Kabutoyama, or the entity that was her just until a few moments ago, majestically stood up. That alone covered my body in chills and fear. It was more repulsive than even death, yet a part of me actually found it enticing, making me feel intoxicated and wanted to let it take me. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised throughout this whole game that Narita has never had a moment where he got onslaught syndrome or anything like that. I mean, I don't know how they would play that into the story, but I think that would be interesting, having the main character like go crazy. It turned its head so awkwardly that you'd guess that it had forgotten how to use its body. Oh, I knew what it was called. It had been with us since ancient times. It was a single concept given different names in many languages all over the world. As I ran, I initiated the boot code. I couldn't miss this one opportunity. The situation was growing worse by the moment, and if I didn't make use of this moment, I would lose all means of resisting it. As the effects of the bombardment were still lingering around, I rushed forward and broke through the white dust blocking my vision. Okay, so real quick, I think logically, I would say no. He shouldn't be able to do it again. And why do I think that? Because he's already done it once, and he's the only one that can cancel his commands. So if he gave her a command that would have got her out of it, how did she get back into it again? She would still be under that influence, right? Unless he's planning on doing some other kind of command. I don't know. Knowing that asking for the same miracle to happen twice was too much, I rushed as fast as I could, fixated solely on this task.
Narita,
I ignored even Taigi's words and... Right before I was within 5 meters of it, my body jumped in the opposite direction. I was running away again. My instincts were thoroughly against coming any closer. Taigi was right, coming any closer to her would have meant my death.
Narita-sama, どうなさったの? そばにいらして。来られないのでしたら、私から参りましょうか?
Dang, she's got those crazy eyes. I spoke with Mitori's voice, but I felt like I was standing in front of a hungry beast. I'll say, can't he use it from pretty far? I mean, I didn't know he had like a range. I just thought he needed to like kind of see them, you know? Mind suppression by Hamlet 12. Shortening the boot code made it lose precision, but I successfully wrote the code for stopping into her brain. Despite that, she was still coming closer. The air around her decayed as she came closer, walking with steps like she was in a ball, completely ignoring her injuries. She wasn't stopping at all.
さあ、ダンスでも踊りましょう。何も心配はいりませんのよ。
サンゴ、ミトリを止めろ。
Was there pain in Taigi's face, or was I just seeing things? The next moment, he was back to normal. No, he looked far more serious than normal.
承知しました。
Like a fired arrow, the maid called number 3 dashed, becoming a living gale. Gosh, do you need to blind me like that? Oh my gosh. I hate when like shows or like games add like these really bright flashing effects. I'm like, no, don't do that. Especially for people who have like seizures and stuff. Don't do that. Like it's annoying to me, but for somebody else, it might be like life-threatening. I digress. With speeds no normal human could easily follow, number 3 bathed in it full auto fire from its rifle. Bathed it in full auto fire from its rifle. There we go. Some of these sentences are very, like, tongue-twisty. Adding to the destruction from the anti-ground missiles still raining from the gunship. In response, it merely swung its fan in a highly refined manner, cutting through everything as high as dozens of meters. As though harvested from a giant invisible sword, the trees in the height collapsed all at once. The AA missiles were cut down in midair, and the rain of 7.25mm rifle bullets that could easily break concrete bullets were deflected by an invisible wall. Overpowering the immense gunfire and ordnance, it continued to abuse its power. It survived the burning barrage like it was a passing summer rain and cracked an ecstatic smile.
さあ、いらっしゃい。
Number 3 evaded an invisible blade by jumping. It calmly swung its fan in return, and in midair, the maid would have no way of escaping it. It was stopped by 2 bullets from my Glock. I fired at her shoulder and leg, and as I only wished to stop her, not kill her. They both hit their mark, making it stumble for the first time. This proved that her defense wasn't absolute. could be seen as a sign of hope. Regardless, I would focus on stopping her first. I'd stop her and then bring her back once again. For that, I had to stop this monster as well as protect it from Taigi. I'd encountered this entity once and knew that I would likely see it again. I'd already prepared for trouble this extreme. I continued firing, quickly releasing a volley of 6 bullets, mostly as feints or keeping her in place. 4 of them were deflected, while the other 2 only grazed her. It shifted its attention to me, but it wasn't faltering one bit. A wound on the side, shoulder, and leg would be enough to make most people faint, but she seemed unaffected. Had she cut her senses using her halo, or did she not care about pain? Yeah, this is a strong woman, alright.
そんなに暴れてはいけませんわよ。もっと礼儀正しくしなければ。
Hey, you first, okay? I'm just trying to save you. You're my friend, and you're being very rude right now by trying to kill me.
それは彼に言うべきだ。
I realized something was wrong and turned around to see the Black Maid make his next move. The baseball-sized metal canister that rolled next to the woman's feet exploded, releasing intense light and sound. It was a stun grenade.
こたかしいことを。
I quickly lowered my face and covered my ears to avoid this intense light and sound. I looked up and saw it covering its eyes with a somewhat angry expression, if you ignored the grin. From that range, a stun grenade would make any human lose their consciousness for a good 10 seconds. But was that all it did to her?
成田、あれはオンスロート、ハローの暴走とでも思ってくれ。
Staying some distance away, Taigi said that with a tense expression. Though I'd taken measures against it, the stun grenade still affected my hearing, but not enough to make me deaf.
通常、ハローは現実と異なる別のレイヤーで働く力だ。だが、オンスロート化したハローは現実を侵食する。こうなればどうしようもない。成田、せめて彼女が罪を犯してしまう前に止めてやってくれ。
You know, Taigi, I wish I could have stopped you before you committed many sins. You know, like not warning me that my whole family was about to die. Do you remember that? Sincere, honest request that I would deny.
絶望にはまだ早い。それは全霊尽くして及ばなかった時にオンスロートから回復した HMI はいない。希望に取りつかれて対局を見誤るな。一度は正気に戻せた。もう一度試してみる価値はある。
It raised her right hand as if to shoo away a bug. An attack, another, a third one. Each of them tore the forest apart, and the fact that the maid was evading them all was miraculous. It wouldn't last long, though. Mitori just needed to flick her wrist once or twice to finally outpace the maid's dodging and cut the tiny frame apart like a piece of cloth. Strangely enough, there was a pain in my chest. It was a feeling that didn't suit the merciless Avenger at all. I used the distraction the maid was risking it all to create to make my next move. I began running straight towards Mitori. Hamlet 12 imprinted not words but orders to the brain. No matter what state Mitori was in, as long as her body moved by orders from the brain, she couldn't avoid it completely. However, it hadn't reached her as she was now. Why? Was it already impossible to bring her back, or had she blocked it like she was blocking bullets? What I did know was that I couldn't reach her from where I was, that it wasn't enough. I crossed the fatal distance of 5 meters and went beyond it. Fully aware that I would have no hope against anything she would do in this range, I unhesitantly approached her. The entire world was rewritten. I saw what I hadn't seen before. There were lightning-like strands of light extending from the empty space and reaching for the limbs like the strings of a marionette. This was the world created by Mitori Kawatayama's Halo, the Tempest 7. Physical area type halos repainted reality within their own world. Halos were limited by the law of physics, but within the personal areas of physical area types, the halos were equal to law, so theoretically nothing was impossible within them. In a way, the personal area was the manifestation of the HMI's inner world, and that alone made it impossible to adjust even for them. Where they would also be effective with Ares rules. Mitori's kingdom was an area of flawless clockwork where everything was under control. In here, all that was human, from the slightest of their movements to the action of the involuntary muscles and hearts, would move as she willed them. It was a halo that controlled the human body. She could easily stop the heart, remove sense of pain, or move an immobile body like a marionette. Gosh, I really still don't understand like all of her power, because I thought she just could summon the spear-like things, but apparently she has other things she can do, as we learned last episode. My hands still moved, and so did my legs, while my heart, lungs, and other vitals were still working. Animals try to survive by instinct, so even in Mitori's area, involuntary muscles and other basic bodily activity must have been preserved subconsciously. Under normal circumstances, entering Mitori's area only made me feel slightly off. However, now that my body was placed under complete control of its will, its automatic functions, such as temperature or heartbeat management, as well as the reflexes I'd honed, no longer worked properly. As proven by the most skillful of many fields, techniques at the highest level were faster than consciousness. I was now detached from the state that could only be reached thanks to the countless hours of training I'd done, as well as the experience I'd piled up, turning my body into a mere subordinate of consciousness. Technique was a product of harmony between mind and body. The situation was akin to having my entire body be replaced by a mannequin's. Even if my limbs could move, I couldn't fight properly. I couldn't evade properly and survive its attacks long enough to make it closer, so I had no choice but to act from here. As I hurried to end this, my right arm got in my way. As though it had become a separate creature, it went against me, reaching into my holster and taking out the Glock 17 before putting it against my temple without any hesitation. I avoided the suicide bullet by forcibly twisting my neck and using my still free left hand to beat the gun out of my right hand. This scene must have looked quite absurd to any onlookers, but despite the comedy, this was actually one of the most dangerous situations I'd ever been in. This was Mitori's halo. It could control not just her own, but others' bodies as well. I had to regain control over my right arm. This battle would be hopeless if I didn't. Gosh, her halo's busted. What's up with all these halos having, like, different functions? It's like, Saku's over here, like, oh yeah, I can pretty much, like, recreate, like, anything. I can take away halos. I can create any kind of halo. Just super broken, right? I mean, I thought Ruri's was broken, but apparently not. And then you got Mitori over here, like, oh yeah, I can control my body and other people's bodies, too, in addition to creating, like, magical spears that appear out of nowhere. It's like, okay. Like, where did that come from? The right arm then tried to strangle me. I catched it with my... Gosh, there's a lot of, like... I'm noticing the further I get into this game, the more, like, grammatical errors and spelling. I catched it. I caught it with my left before it reached my neck. I knew this would create a fatal opening, but I didn't have the luxury of a better choice. As I stood in place, I felt killing intent gather all around me. It was as impossible to grasp as a mist, and as sharp as a drill. I actually recognized it. These were Mitori's spindles, the ones I'd experienced in choreography. The invisible spears assumed a shape. I tried to dodge, but I wasn't fast enough. My limbs were far duller than they would be under normal circumstances, after all. I'd be hit. I felt it coming, despite no pain or impact. However, this time it didn't tear me. It was far worse. My body went crazy. Hands, legs, joints, muscles, nerves, hearts. The new orders from outside made my body move like it was out of control. I mean, are they trying to explain this by saying that, like, her spears, in a sense, like, are able to, like, control you? Like, she can just use them physically to, like, slash things or destroy them, right? But she can also use them to control people. I mean, I guess if you're going to explain it that way, I guess that makes sense, but I don't know. Lots of crazy halos in this game. The new threads of light wrapped around me were the true form of the spindles I'd just been hit with, though these didn't come from the empty space but Mitori's own body. The countless threads was Mitori Kabatayama's personal area. They were the strings that controlled humankind like marionettes. The spindles were basically just these threads rolled into tough bunches, then fired into the distance. During choreography, she most likely hit me with an order of apoptosis. Had it been cut, she just made the damaged area undergo rapid necrosis, meaning that I'd essentially been cut by a function of my own body. It now made sense why walls and clothes remain unharmed, and she probably hadn't controlled my body back then because I was too far. Interesting. I mean, does this apply to even when she's not doing this? So like she causes whatever she hits to like essentially cut itself? Is that kind of what she's saying? Or I guess, you know, what he's saying that her ability does. Physical area type halos were generally close range. She could roll up, connect, or expand her personal area like threads to surpass the limits of range, but that limited her to only simple orders. She had to be close to do more. I always thought her halo had a much bigger range than, what was it, like 5 meters? Is that what it was? I always thought it could go a lot further, because I thought she was more like a sniper type thing, but I don't know. And now we were extremely close, and since I was a human-like construct, she could bend me to her will. My limbs were not my own. I couldn't move or speak. I was basically bound. This made me unable to use my halo either. I felt like a fly caught in a spider's web.
そろそろおしまいの時間ですの?
The feminine monster sneered. The expression didn't suit her at all. And I would let it stay there? I forced my tongue and lips to create words.
いいえ、やはりおしまいですわ。ご安心ください。あとは私が守って差し上げます。
I feel like this was revenge for us saying that we were gonna take her to the pound and possibly get her put down. You know, like I did say a lot of things that were kind of mean last episode about, you know, her being like an animal. I think this was revenge. I couldn't breathe. My vision was drowning in white. She'd stopped my heart. The beats were no more. My blood flow slowed down and my brain wasn't getting enough oxygen. Naturally, that put an end to my consciousness. Yeah, but we're Narita Shinri, okay? You know, you can't beat us that easily. Like, what the heck? Not yet. I couldn't fall yet. Shinri Narita still hadn't done what he had to. I had to fulfill my oath and keep the promise I made to Mitori. This is our plot armor coming in. I made up for the stopped blood flow with other energy. I looked for an alternative to my broken limbs. I couldn't let myself give in to despair as long as I was alive. You know, despair is just a stepping stone for hope, guys. Remember that. The anger and hatred within this body couldn't be stopped by the loss of a mere heart or two. Alright, let's freaking go. Uh-oh. That ain't looking good. I think we passed out. Well, that was a good try. I opened my eyes to see a dark, starless sky. It was shockingly clear, as though there was no atmosphere, but there wasn't a single bit of light. It wasn't pure darkness, however. Far off in the distance, there was a shining, golden tower so tall I couldn't see the top. I soon realized I was on the surface. Oh, hey, it's the thing from the starting screen. It's like this field of, like, kind of, I don't know, almost looks like kind of red sand, like we're on Mars or something. It was all covered in reddish burned sand. There wasn't a single planet as far as I could see, nor any signs of life. No animals, insects, or even microbes. This land was completely barren and void. The silence of this vacuum made me feel like I was on the surface of the moon, and it made my ears hurt. I saw a silhouette. There was one person on this wasteland, a puppet-like entity vibrating to the sides. There was a clockwork music nearby, and the jester danced along with the sounds. The jester sung. It seemed human, but I instantly understood that it was too unnatural to be that. It was like a storm confined into the shape of a human, something that was assuming the appearance by force. We're just like, dang, I shouldn't have took those drugs earlier. I suddenly had an epiphany. Though there was no reason to think it, I realized that this was the realm within Mitori. It was difficult for halos to influence others directly. Controlling someone else's body was such a hard task that in most cases they used indirect channels such as heat or pressure. Even an Etoile tier HMI like Mitori couldn't ignore this rule. Her halo was still nothing more than complete control of herself. However, she was cheating. She bypassed this halo law by using the threads of her area to connect others to her and essentially make them a part of herself. It was only natural I could see her in her area. Now that she had taken control of me, I was not only Shinri Narita, but I was also Mitori Kabutoyama. Kinda weird. This contradictory state created this phenomenon.
お前は何だ？
道家に名を尋ねるなど無粋なこと。
The jester danced, danced, danced. Dance Dance Revolution?
そうか。お前は。
そうとも、僕は。
最初の一。我々の根源か。
So the origin of HMIs is this unnamed jester, huh? Is that what you're implying?
君の尊い願いは頂に届くだろうか。
I'm trying to think, is the voice actor for this clown, the voice actor for Charles? Is that his name? Like, y'all know who I'm talking about. You've seen Code Geass, right? Like, if you haven't seen Code Geass and you're watching this game, please go watch that show, because I feel like if you like this, you'll like Code Geass. Like, there's just no way that you could not like Code Geass and then like this. Because the main characters are both, like, really, like, strong, like, confident types. I'm trying to think if that's the voice of, like, either Charles, or, not Charles, I don't want to say anything more. It's one of the characters from that show that you see kind of later in the show. One of the Geass holders, how about that? The sneering jester jumped around, exhibiting no good or evil.
どこへ行きたい？
The jester's song made me feel oddly peaceful. Staying here with it would surely be more tranquil than anything. My limbs were as heavy as lead. It felt as though they'd been cut off, and even standing was a challenge. If I could just slide down here and sleep while waiting for the morning that would never come, the serenity I would feel would be unmatched. I wouldn't have to cry about the past I lost, nor be burned by the hatred within. This desolate wasteland was a reflection of my own heart as well. For the past 7 years, I'd embraced the madness of revenge and headed forward, even without looking back. It was a path I could stop walking at any moment, yet I walked it despite how taxing it was on me. There were tragedies everywhere. Even if you occasionally extended a helping hand, the world continued to spawn tears, betrayal, and failure. It was an endless, inexhaustible rondo of despair. People were nothing but jesters dancing on a stage until morning that would never come, all because of the whims of a bored lord above.
選ぶ道はすでに決まっている。
He has a very kind of nihilistic view on life, I would say. He feels like there's, like, no joy just because there's a bunch of sad things. I would argue that there is joy because there's sadness. The jester stopped dancing and looked at me with curiosity. I had to go to it. My legs were too decayed to move properly. As I dragged them, they left behind rotten flesh. Ew, that's kind of gross. I didn't need that description, but sure. I reached forward with my right hand. That alone required all my strength, even so I had to keep going.
どうして行くの？
Because I need to save my friend.
成田真理だからだ。
That too. The jester looked at the hand reaching for it with curiosity. 1 millimeter, then another. Bearing the pain torturing my heart, I pathetically struggled to go forward to the entity that was looking at me curiously. Shinarita had sworn revenge. I decided it on my own and was ready for any pain and grief. Why would I regret going as far as I could? My right hand, its fingers touched it.
され、どけ。私は行くべきところへ行こう。
Okay, that's the Shinarita I love right there. Let's freaking go! You tell him. I crushed the featureless space and shook it off. Alright, let's go save our friend. Enough messing around with some jester thing. Nearly dead, I realized that my eyes were closed. I felt a gaze. Not an enemy's gaze, though. It came from within. Yes, I finally realized. The imperfection that had been there from the start would be corrected. I felt a connection of some sort. Finally, I felt my heartbeat return. Blood rushed through my veins, and I felt heat. I will say, and I'm not really sure, like, what the correct word to describe it is, but, like, the cinematography, I guess, like the effects that they've been using and like the color and everything has been like really good in this route. Like they've been actually like doing some more stuff with it. I felt like the main route was kind of like I don't want to say it's boring or like it just felt very reserved, I guess, with some of the effects they used. But like this one, I feel like it's been using more like this ember effect we got going on right here, and like the lighting that makes the forest look like almost like it's on fire a little bit. It's been really nice. I think they've done a good job on it. I slowly opened my eyes, exposing myself to the strong reality of the forest around me. A twisting pain rushed through my hands and legs, but I couldn't move them. There was some conflict between the feeling of bodily control within Mitori's personal area, but the spindle that had rid me of control had been undone. Oh, she looks pissed.
あらあら、一体どうやって。
I don't know, I talked to some jester guy and I was like, screw you. What I'm most surprised about this was that thing. Oh, well, that's kind of rude. That's your friend, even though she's like, I don't know, kind of under control of this ancient part of her. The spindles of her personal area couldn't even be touched, so there was no reason why Shinri Narita to be able to shake it off. It had taken a step back, not by conscious choice. The immortal monster had lost herself because of this incomprehensible situation. I stuck out my right hand and captured its left. I was so wasted away that I couldn't speak a single decent phrase. My body was so fatigued that I couldn't speak for dozens of seconds even after restoring my body with the breathing of Geb, yet I still did what I had to. Our hands touched for only a moment. I didn't have a proper reason for doing this. It was just strangely certain that this was what I had to do. Mitori swung her hand away and jumped back as far as she could. The monster was retreating, abandoning all pretense and pride. The fan was swung, the invisible threads overflowed like a river of tears. Like Taigi had said, the threads from her personal area that could alter reality transition into semi-physical phenomena, giving them an edge sharper than that of the finest blades. The forest went out of alignment. The countless threads tore apart reality. The trees were cut down on the same level and began collapsing at the same time. The surface below was cut as well. Crevices opened up in every cardinal direction, creating detailed cubes that quickly crumbled. If I hadn't recovered in time and jumped backwards, the same would have surely happened to me. It was a localized storm that sliced up all it touched, and Mitori was no longer at its heart. She'd escaped in just a moment, and I no longer had the strength to chase after her. Well, frick, we're not supposed to let her escape. I mean, what's gonna happen now? Taigi watched a part of the forest collapse with eyes like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He had seen records of Onslaught Syndrome cases, but what he had known was no match for reality. He realized that he wasn't severe enough on this.
Narita, Mitori.
The wall of dark dust blocked his sight, and he couldn't see whether Narita was alive. Mitori was most likely already gone. If Mitori wanted to kill him, she would have done it already, so the fact that he was alive meant that she had already escaped. He knew full well that Narita would never back down and that there was no way to save Mitori. Had he prayed that obstinate blockhead would have a change of heart, or had he dreamt of an impossible miracle? People could never catch up to the world. Fate always had cruel betrayals in store for them. He knew that better than anyone, so why didn't he take care of the situation himself right away? His own vague thoughts made him laugh. How could he say that when he wasn't able to go anywhere? There was no hate, for that would just be a reversal of the hope. There's no bloodlust, for that would just be a fruit of rage. Taigi Mikudo was unfamiliar with both of those things. He had no hopes or desires. They'd all vanished on that day long ago. Taigi Mikudo sighed in a disinterested manner, turning back to himself before reaching for the earphone in his ear to report the situation. But then he froze. Taigi silently took off the earphone and held it between two fingers before throwing it away as far away from his ear as possible. Oh. sound of a gun roared out. The earphone was shot.
これでようやく話ができるな。
Okay, I thought for a second he was gonna shoot Taigi. I was like, yes, let's go. I don't know. I don't like that Taigi's so like disinterested in everything. I feel like that just makes him a character that is kind of a dick. Because he just doesn't really care about right from wrong or anything like that. And he kind of did a lot of stuff against our family. Like, not like he went out of his way to do something against us, but he didn't do anything for us either, right? So I feel like inaction can be as bad as bad actions. But that's just me.
無事とはね。人間離れしているのは知っていたけど、そこまでデタラメとは思わなかった。
Because I don't suck like you.
掴んで振りほどいた。
Yeah, kind of.
君の冗談は昔から面白くないんだよ。
I feel like he's kind of half joking. Like he kind of just did rip off her thing, her like hold on him, and just threw it off. I mean, maybe not like the individual spindles, but there was a Glock 17 aimed at him from behind. The one holding it was, of course, Narita. No, there's no way. Like I could see if it was somebody else, but Narita pointing a gun at somebody? No, never. Such a good guy, right? His breathing was ragged. The battle against Mitori must have been taxing. You didn't even do anything. What the? Unless he's talking about... Are they talking about Narita? I thought it was saying this about Taigi at first. I was like, Taigi didn't even do anything. How was he tired? But yeah, Narita, yeah. I guess, yeah, I could see him being pretty hurt right now. Faced with this golden opportunity, Taigi just raised his hands in resignation. Oh, and this maid's still around. Number 3, heavily wounded and dragging a leg behind, appeared from between the trees. The rifle-nosed arms had been empty for a long time, yet the maid was ready to battle as a starved lynx.
やめてくれないか。あと、君も外してくれ。
Nike tapped his ear, making the maid obey like a robot and remove the earphone. Having been damaged and with his arsenal exhausted, the gunship had retreated too, meaning that no one but those present would hear the conversations here.
それほど猶予はないよ。コーディリアを使ってしまったからね。君たちがここにいるのを時の先生も気づいたろ。すぐに増援が送られてくるはずだ。手間をかけるつもりはない。ミトリを追わなければならないからな。
I don't know if we have energy to do that.
君はまだ彼女を救うつもりなのかい？可能性がある限り約束は守る。すべての道が断たれたとしても、それでも私は彼女を救う。それは彼女の肉体を、それとも魂を。
No response, just a brief, heavy breathing.
聞きたいことがある。帝大義。
I honestly wish she'd call him by his real name sometimes instead of calling him Mikado. But they might not know. I mean, Taigi might know that he's Shinsui, but maybe, like, I don't know, maybe not everyone knows that yet. Taigi remembered the distant past. He spent a minute thinking about how to respond to his sincere, passionate words.
いいとも。僕の知っている限りのことを教えよ
う。Alright, Taigi, what do you gotta say here? I'm gonna listen to you. It better be something interesting. Oh, good. It's not him talking. Perfect. Mitori Kabutoyama was a born HMI. She could see the structure of the human body before she first opened her eyes. She eventually realized that this was a privilege that she alone had. People of olden days revered untouchable natural might as divine. It was in human nature to fear and respect what was beyond comprehension. Mitori could see them all, but she barely considered any of them. People were machines made of flesh, and she could see that even the pulses involved in their movements. As a noble being who had been granted powers from above, she had a duty to protect the weak, but there was no reason to think much about them. All that mattered were the numbers. If her given role was to make as many of her people survive, then she had to lower the number of those who died. As a member of the Kabutoyama family, she had always made choices that minimized the number of those who had fallen from under her wing. To her, it was much like checking her products for problems and getting rid of those she found effective. It didn't make her feel anything close to regret. It was a perfect world that didn't allow for the existence of something as ambiguous as the heart. She hadn't changed even after she was found by Kurofune. She'd arrived at the academy and met other HMIs, but none of them were all that different from the rest. All of them were incomplete. They were all pitiful people who couldn't control themselves and had powers that were too much for them. I mean, I really hope she's not saying that she's different, because she literally can't control her powers either. She'd been evaluated as a Netwala, and she took it as if only to be expected. Stars were stars, no matter where they went, after all. That was when Saku Otonashi asked her to join the Crowns.
私に軍門に下れと、そうおっしゃるのね。
Mitori considered the offer she'd just been given. School was over for the day. She'd been resting her chin in her hand with the empty classroom as Saku approached her. No one had been brave enough to do something like this since Mitori
そ
transferred.
うではなくて、自分の義務を果たさねばならないと言っているのです。兜山さん。
Mitori snickered. She was a star, yet this person was treating her like an equal. How blatantly imperfect of her. I mean, to be fair, Saku is stronger than you, so you better know your place.
あなたに私を使う資格がありますの？
Just take away her halo right now. And then give it back.
何が言いたいのかしら？
I don't know if she could do that. Could she just take it away and give it right back? I don't think she can.
支配するべきものが支配する。それこそがノーブル。私にとってあなたはあまたの者たちと同じでしかないと、そう言っているのです。
Mitori did agree on the very idea of joining the Crowns. A garden lacking maintenance would quickly fall into ruins. Many people were so weak that they would break without any protection. Gosh, Mitori, the way you're talking right now makes me uncomfortable. It's like, just because people are weak doesn't mean they need to be protected, right? Someone had to lead that over 100 HMIs in the academy, and it was only natural that it would be done by the greatest of the Crowns. However, Mitori didn't know if this woman, Saku Otonashi, was worthy. It wasn't a matter of lineage or social standing to her. A leader only had to have a will and the power. And in her eyes, every single person that wasn't her was imperfect.
もっとわかりやすく申しましょうか。私を従えたいのなら、力ずくでなさい。
I mean, to be fair though, when I first started playing the game, I kind of thought that Mitori was going to be a lot more like this. I mean, she was kind of like very prestigious, which I thought she would be as well. But I thought she'd be more like a tsundere type person, or maybe I don't know, just like a kind of a rich girl and act like that. But she ended up being a lot nicer than I thought she would be. But this kind of explains it. She was kind of like that before. Saku ended up not accepting the challenge. As Saku left, Mitori was looking down at her as she once again realized that the woman wasn't worth any more than the others. Saku didn't know what to do in response to the challenge. She had her hands full fighting the lack of experience within her. Mitori could understand her as she was now, but back then she couldn't even consider that much, making her the true inexperienced person. The next day. To Mitori, the world was something to protect. She controlled, and the people received her protection. A value system split beautifully in two. Some would call it discrimination, but in Mitori's eyes, it was just division of roles. After all, rule in the hands of the unworthy was a true tragedy for the masses. Looking down at the inner garden through the window of a third-floor classroom, Mitori smirked and closed her fan. Well, Air was gone. Aero, who was in the inner garden, suddenly charged towards the pale wall of the school buildings at speed that greatly surpassed her physical ability. She raised her voice upon noticing, but she was too late. Oh, and she nearly took out Zoriko.
大丈夫だった、エルちゃん。
Before Eru crashed Soroko Katsuragi, another crown, exerted herself to stop her. Soroko didn't move right away. The great force of the impact left her somewhat incapacitated. Though if she hadn't gotten involved, Eru would have been severely injured if not dead. Harming one's people out of mischief was a lowly act, but if necessary, she had no problem doing it. She had to protect the garden as a whole, after all, not every separate plant. Oh, was I implying that Mitori, made her discharge like that? What a dick! Saku raised her head, and her eyes met Mitori's. Oh, what joy, she was oh so mad. She must have realized who was responsible for this comedy.
さあどう出られますかしら
Saku could handle insults to herself, but harm done to her friends filled her with indignation. Alright, you know what you need to do, Saku. Just reach in, take her halo, just yeet it out. This adorable way of being made Mitori snicker once again. Gosh, why is this making me dislike Mitori?
あなたがやったの、カブトヤマさん。
あらおとなしさの腰巾着ですのね
Ooh, okay. Contrary to her expectations upon coming back to the door, Mitori was confronted by Soroko. The girl had nothing special to her besides her constant cheerful smile, but now her eyebrows were furrowed. I don't know, I wouldn't mess with Soroko. I mean, Soroko doesn't understand, I think, most of the time, the level of power she has, but when she does, you better be worried. Mitori was honestly disappointed that she wasn't the person she'd
手
hoped
下を
for.
差し向けてくるなんておとなしさも存外他愛のないこれはいよいよ話になりませんかしら
僕が勝手に来たんだよ。サクは関係ない。
あらそうですのではお話しするのは無駄ですのね
はぐらかさないで。カブトヤマさん、昼間エルちゃんに何かしたのは。
Just bam. She changes the color of everything instantly, and it's so shocking. Soroko's words were suddenly cut short. Mitori didn't intend to waste any time on her nonsense. Instead, she put on a display of power that even the densest could understand.
おしゃべりできませんでしょ同じエトワールというから多少は期待しましたのに本当に他愛もありませんのね腰巾着さん
Well, I'll have you know, your genjutsu won't work on everybody, okay? Soroko was unable to move even a single finger on her own anymore, and Mitori only tilted her head and put on a cold smile. She then thought about how to play with her, but then...
やめなさい
Where's Tamao at? Is she not here yet? Saku Otonashi had returned from the academy and now stood in the living room. Eru Takazaki was right next to her, like a shadow.
私におっしゃいましたのそれでやめなければどうすると
I'm telling you, Saku, just do it. Just take away her halo. Put her in her place. She'll stop talking like that immediately. Saku took a deep breath before looking straight at Mitori.
止めるわそれは面白いこと
The tense air made a smile appear on her face. It was as sharp as the crescent moon. All the imperfect people surrounding her were making her feel truly bored.
てめえなんかサクが片手でポンポコポーのピーなのです
Probably, honestly. Saku Otonashi was the insignia of the academy. As the chosen peak of the HMI, she had to be the first worthy prey Mitori had ever met.
では見せていただきましょうか
She felt excited like never before, and it almost made her lick her lips, but then a strange thought went through her like lightning. Okay. So she realized for a second, hey, I'm not gonna win here. Just when had that happened? The image in her mind was as faint as light leaking through the leaves, and she couldn't even tell whether it was real or an illusion born from her mind. Still going crazy over here? Mitori opened her eyes to find herself in a dark place, a dark corner of a back alley somewhere in town. Why was she here? She had only fragments of the memories of the events that led her here. There was no consistency, like in film that had been randomly cut up. An entire day or two passed since she escaped that forest. It couldn't have been 3, but that was the best guess she could make. During all this time, her consciousness was randomly appearing on the surface, like bubbles on water, only to sink again. Even now, she'd felt like the darkness could take her if she wasn't careful. Her body wanted rest, but she was afraid to even sleep. Every time she lost consciousness, she could feel bits of herself leaving like water leaking through a hole in the container. Mitori Kabutoyama. That was a fact of her life, yet she wasn't all that confident even in that anymore. She no longer had a place to go to. The truth alone was deeply imprinted in her mind. She couldn't go back to the academy nor seek salvation from anyone. What was that again? No. The memories were still there. Each of them were easy to find if she looked for them, but she was now failing to grasp the meaning behind them. It was a primal transformation that was hard to put into words, as if she was forced to realize that all those events she treasured were actually worthless. Worthless memories were nothing but information. They weren't worth remembering, and they would sink to the bottom and be buried forever. The pain in her heart was only matched by the burning in her body. Whenever her consciousness surfaced, she was attacked by waves of a thirst that seemed to be burning each and every one of her nerves. She clawed at the asphalt below her hands, not holding back one bit. The unbearable pain caused lowered thirst just a bit and relaxed her. She writhed around, and her torturous feeling didn't seem to go away. Even if she turned off her senses, it reached something even deeper than her body. She had no choice but breathe raggedly and wait for it to pass. After all, the only way to escape this hunger was to slake it. She occasionally felt people pass by, and every time she heard something within her let out a low whisper. You just became... Oh, what a terrifying and sweet whisper. After all, she was a kind promise to be just that. Oh, okay. I was really confused by that sentence. Her wish would come true if she just indulged in her urges. Her wish to protect. Her body was being tortured by an unquenchable thirst. Why was she resisting if it would make her wish come true? Something within her was screaming, telling her that even death was a better alternative to that. The words were the remains of Mitori, and they made a faint pain run through her heart. She embraced it like sweet nectar and forced herself to stop. However, it was only a matter of time. She was resisting it now, but tomorrow, or later, the urges that couldn't go away would overwhelm her. The result of this battle was clear before it began, so before it happened, she had to what? Her consciousness lapsed again. At some point, the spasm of pain abated. She had been unconscious for several minutes now, if not hours. Just what was she doing during the time she couldn't remember? Was she just sleeping like a corpse? Or was it all too late, and all of her struggling was completely meaningless? I wonder if she's doing what Saku ended up doing, like going out and killing HMIs. She saw dreams as though asleep, an endless empty field of grass and a golden tower. Whenever she was here, she could forget her hunger, making her just want to stay here. She wanted that from the bottom of her heart, but something within was resisting it. She was wasting away more and more. People could get used to pain, but they couldn't bear peace. She knew that she would be saved if she just reached out, but resisting it was too much. She knew that she would finally break tonight. And before she knew it, it was night. She wanted to give in to the dead light of the moon, but the heat coming from within raged within her so hard it felt like it could tear her apart. Her sigh was heated, and it stuck to her throat like a beast. She was hungry and thirsty, beyond compare. She raised her body, which was dry as a mummy. She didn't know why she had to run into a back alley. Outside, she saw a woman walking by, and the sight of her back made Mitori lick her lips. Gosh, you know what this feels like? It feels like a vampire movie or something. I feel like I'm watching Twilight right now. You know, with the way she was kind of narrating throughout her whole route, and now she's trying to resist the urge to drink blood. That's what this feels like to me. As though dancing, she began chasing the woman, only to stop soon after. She had noticed a silhouette that entered the back alley. It seemed to Mitori that it was trying to stand in her way, and that made her laugh. There was a limit to how unaware of their position one could be. That was no problem to her, though. Everyone was dear to her, after all, obstacle or not. Gosh, she's like twisted her mind so much. Oh, what a beautiful moon and a wonderful night. Perfect for starting a new me.
らしくねえ顔してんじゃねえ。
It's Tamao. The silhouette standing in the way voiced a limit. After getting a good look at it, Mitori slightly furrowed her brow. It's Yo Girl.
玉をさ
ああ、俺だ。んだよ。タヌキにでも化かされたような面しやがって。
The person was none other than Tamao Akihito. The eyes of the girl Mitori knew well were reflecting the town's lights like a pair of sad gems. The face of a friend Mitori hadn't seen in a long time made her smile like a blooming
ど
flower.
うしてこんなところへああなるほど晩作尽きた時の先生がとうとうクラウンを動かしたとそういうことですのね
Mitori nodded to herself while the girl scoffed. Still standing tall in Mitori's way, she spoke in a voice full of displeasure.
んなわけあるか。時の先生やクソ理事長はよ、この一件、俺たち学生には是が非でも知られたくないらしいぜ。いいことを教えてやろうか、ミトリ。てめえは家庭の事情で突然呼び戻されて、スクールを辞めたんだとよ。
And that was a lie.
あらそんな事情がすると私どうしてこんな場所にいるのかしら
さあな。てめえのことなんざ俺の知ったこっちゃねえ。それよりもだ。さっき何しようとしてやがった。
The air seemed to grow stiff. Despite the sharp and lethal murderous intent directed at her, Mitori smiled as if it was nothing.
それはさっき見かけた女何をしようとしていたのかという意味ですの
Gonna bite her ankle like the dog that I am.
別に何というわけでもええ本当ですよ特に彼女じゃなくてもどなたからでも構わないんです今は玉尾さんの方が楽しめそうですわ
ああ、そうかい。
Her voice had more sadness than hatred. Tamao took a deep breath before taking a forward, focused position. She was now like a wolf hunting prey in the night.
お前がもう困ってないって言うなら、俺にできることは一つっきりだ。ミトリ、てめえがどういう理由でそうなっちまったかは知らねえが、まず俺が始末をつけてやる。
Those words marked the start.
Set! How beauteous mankind is! Brave new world!
It's a whole new world.
Set We are such stuff as dreams are made of
Oh, very good. Often we get to see her powering up.
Type G Tempest 4.
Type C Tempest 7
Ah!
Boot coats coloring the soundscape of night, both summoning the Tempest, the physical area types. Mitori was the first to act. Her sights were fixed and the spindles spread in all directions were released at the same time.
人は所詮夢と同じ織物目を覚ませば消えてしまう幻ですから私が守って差し上げます
I'm still trying to understand. Does she think like she's going to kill them and that's going to protect them? Like, is that her goal? The simultaneous attack from every direction was impossible to evade, and even if Tamao escaped above, the spindles would change trajectory to follow after her.
これは
The spindles she'd been so confident in had been struck down, and she had even lost sight of the enemy. This was shockingly unexpected. Tamao had slipped behind Mitori, who still had a smile on her face. The reason why Mitori had lost sight of her wasn't mere speed, but the unique technique Tamao had. Even among the crowds, Mitori was probably the only one who knew that the normal Tamao Akihito wasn't going all out. Her ability to control others' bodies as well as her own let her see that well. Even so,
まさかこれほどとは思いませんでしたわ。
ぶっちゃければ俺の方がビビってるぜ。今のは結構マジでやったんだがな。
as she passed by, Tamao targeted a weak spot in Mitori's neck with a knife hand strike, but Mitori had actually evaded it just before it landed.
妙な避け方しやがる。気づく前にかわすとはさすがに俺も思わなかったよ。今ので分かったろ。お前は俺とじゃ。
Before she could finish, Mitori made her next move. How rude. You're not supposed to interrupt someone when they're dialoguing. The sea of her invisible threads silently spread. They were a representation of her personal area, and they waved, wriggled, and slithered like a swarm of snakes in order to embrace Tamao whole. They covered the ground, climbed the walls, and covered the space above. Mitori's threads, as they were now, no longer just controlled people. They consumed reality like bristletails that ate paper. What the heck is a bristletail? Why is it eating paper? Kinda weird. Whatever the threads touched, be it human or steel, as long as it was on the paper layer known as reality, they would tear them apart. Tamao's speed was beyond reason, and the threads covered the area whole, making it impossible to escape them. In fact, Tamao wasn't even moving from where she was. The moment it seemed to Mitori that it would touch her, Mitori shook like she just touched a hot stove, and her threads retreated like the tide.
ふざけた話だな。
Tamao didn't see the invisible threads, but she could feel the pressure surrounding her. She looked around with a displeased expression and a glare. She moved forward as if it didn't mean anything to her, parting the sea of threads like the prophet from sacred scripture.
玉緒さん、どうやって。
Tamao walked forward without a hint of panic. Mitori used her threads and spindles on her again and again, but all of them were dispersed before they even touched their
お
target.
前、時の先生の授業も忘れるぐらいボケちまってんのかよ。見てらんねえな。
The personal area was the very manifestation of an HMI's consciousness, and it was impossible for two of them to melt into one. Naturally, in an encounter between two physical area type HMIs, their areas completely repelled each other. Tokino called it the personal area non-intervention principle. Tamao was an HMI that enhanced her physical abilities by spreading her personal area on her body, while Mitori was an HMI that influenced others by turning her personal area into threads or spindles she used on others. Based on the principle, Mitori's threads and spindles were thoroughly incapable of touching Tamao. Oh, okay.
だからさっき言いかけ
So
た。
she has like her own shield against it.
俺とじゃ相性が悪すぎるって。
Yeah, but Tamao can just hit her. I mean, she doesn't even need to like use her space per se. Mitori clenched her teeth, and the one without a future here was Tamao. She wiped her cheek that had been torn by the first clash. It left a trail of blood. The wound wasn't even a few millimeters deep, and it wouldn't be a problem in continuing the fight. Though that was only true if it was supposed to touch her. If what wasn't supposed to touch her actually did do just that. Mitori Kabutoyama was beginning to surpass the rules of Halos. The woman was a seed that would consume the world if allowed to sprout. Smel's instincts told her that if she missed the opportunity, she'd be the one to fall eventually. That was why she'd give her all to take it.
じゃあそろそろ行くぜ。今だから言うけど、お前が空子に教えてもらって焼いたクッキー、
Oh!
ひどい味だったよ。
Dang. Tamao. I didn't think you'd use personal attacks like that. Dang. Calling her cookies crap. You go, girl. A town with lights scattered around an empty back alley. And the frickin' burn that she just left on Mitori. Winds clashed within the stillness of night. Mitori greatly increased her speed by removing the limiters on her body, while Tamao chased her after her while moving even faster. The ground, walls, the air, the two moved in every direction, looking like momentary shadows to any normal people who might have witnessed them. A fence next to the footpath bent, traffic signs were split in the middle, the giant Okushima billboard on the side of a high-rise building Lost the 2 middle letters to the destruction. Which 2 middle letters? So did it lose like the S and H? So it's Okuima now? Their clash only grew in speed and intensity, increasing the damage done. I don't know why I'm thinking about the middle letters still. The streetlights were bursting one after another. A car in an intersection had something pass by in front, making it swerve and hit the guardrail. They rose like a double helix running up the walls of a Scandinavian-style building, and by the time they're on the roof, the battle was good as over. Gosh, they're just freaking running up walls, I guess. Mitori fell to one knee and moaned, not because of pain, but because of a spasm. Tortured by a severe hunger, Mitori writhed like a fish out of water. I mean, dang, girl, eat something, okay? Like, as long as it's not a person.
いいよ。楽にしてやる。
Sure, you can find a good ramen place around there, you know? Without any hesitation, she swung a knife hand at her ex-friend's neck. The attack that would split her spine and end her suffering. You better not kill her. What do you mean?
Narita!
Narita? Let's go. Was stopped by the sudden appearance of Shinri Narita. Okay.
今追いついた。よく発見してくれた。人手を集めた甲斐がある。支払いはいいねで構わない。
Still holding Tumao's right hand, Narita was giving his thanks to someone on the other end of a throwaway phone with a voice changer function. Voice changer
人
function.
のデートに首突っ込んどいてよそ見かよ。つくづくいい性格してやがるな。
Oh, I didn't know you swung that way, Tumao.
久しぶりに再会した学友に向けるにしては、随分な挨拶ではないかね。
Narita ended the call. Ignoring him, Tumao tried to go after Mitori again, only to jump back a moment later. Her own instincts had told her to.
何しようと。
さて、おおよそ分かってきたところだよ。
何わからねえこと言ってやがる。
The arm he'd just held was shaking. There was nothing wrong with it now, but she could have sworn that it had died back when he'd stopped it. Not even she knew what that meant, but that was what she had felt.
玉を少しでいい。時間をくれないか。
Wonder what his plan is here. Oh my gosh, it's another flashback. It just didn't make sense no matter how hard she tried. One might have been understandable, but the fact that the two Etoilas had suddenly vanished without as much of a goodbye was just unbelievable. Okay, well, I don't think...
この量もいきなり寂しくなっちゃったね。
I don't find flashbacks bad, I just think this route has a lot of them. And it's like, there's good stuff going on right now, I don't want them to constantly take me out of the action like this.
成田の秩父行と大義のボンボンは
Boob
いても
Baboon.
いなくても
That's a new one.
いるとむしろ邪魔ですが
The Taigi one's not, but the Boob Baboon, I believe, is a new one. In response to Eru's sharp words, Soriko forced a smile. The empty seat stood out a lot, making the mood somewhat lonely. Out of the 7 Etoilas there used to be, only 4 had gathered for this tea party. Saku, Eru, Tamao, and Soriko. Mitori and Narita had vanished while Taigi wasn't showing up. And Taigi doesn't ever show
そ
up
うい
to
えば
nothing.
サク、
Doesn't
ミ
care.
トリたちに連絡とか言ってなかったか。
Saku just shook her head.
そっか、ダメだったんだ。一体何があったんだろう。
ミトリがですか？
ミトリちゃんもだけど、成田くんも。
そらこう生父も生まれてちょっと気持ちよかったからってハマりすぎです。父しか脳にない男はサブカルチャーをメジャーにしようなんてブスを抜かす偉い人級に人類文化の敵。
Always gotta talk about boobs, don't we?
違うよ。そこまで気持ちよくなって
But
な
how
い
do
よ。
you know?
でも、どうして知ってるの？
I'm sure everyone knows.
大義のボンボンも今やこの量は男一人のハーレムウハウハ状態なのにろくに顔も見せないのが超怪しい。
Yeah, something tells me Taigi doesn't really care. He doesn't really care about his harem here. To be honest, it's Narita's anyway, so.
自分の当てずっぽう推理によれば、あやつこそ成田不在の真犯人。パイハンター成田を愛してしまったがゆえの犯行。僕よりおっぱいを選んだ君が許せないんだ。
That's another new one. Hill Hunter. Okay, I'm gonna use that one. Somebody who likes big boobs. A hill hunter. Okay. I like it a lot.
マジ当てずっぽうで推理でもなんでもね
I don't know. I do wonder if Taigi's gay, though. I mean, obviously he's, like, loyal to Ruri, right? But I don't know. They have a weird relationship. It might not be one of love, so he might be gay. I don't know.
ミトリが帰ってきたら、どっちが立ちか猫かで一晩熱く語り合いましょう。
Oh gosh, not that conversation again. I just remember that between her and Hishia.
エルちゃん、ミトリちゃんは
お家の事情で出てったのに帰ってくるわけねえだろ
Yeah, but that was some bull crap. We all know
僕が
it.
そう言いました。だから帰ってくるのです。
It wasn't like Saku to be so irresponsible. Tamao was worried that the fatigue from the past few days might have taken its toll on her.
帰って来られたらいいなって言っただけよ。ミトリに本当に事情があるのならそれでいいわ。
Saku was speaking as if she didn't doubt that.
絶対にこのまま終わらせない。
サクってさ時々むちゃくちゃ言うよな変なところに首突っ込んでお前までろくでもない目にあったらどうすんだよ
If it's getting you into some deep stuff, you better start swimming.
私のことは別にいいの。友達が困っていたら助けたい。当たり前でしょ。ミトリだけじゃなくて、タマオもソラコもエルも、みんな私の大切な友達よ。誰かが困ってたら同じようにするわ。
Well, you know, Saku is a good friend, for sure.
友達
それが友情なのです。わかったか、ヤンキー。ちなみにサクを困らせる奴がいたら、自分が撃って出て殲滅です。
Oh, okay. And then there's Arrow. There's always Arrow making very interesting comments in a conversation.
じゃあエルちゃんが困った時は僕が助けるね。
みんな暑苦しいからひっつくのダメなのです。
Good times. Good times. Can't wait for all the girls to be back together. And Narita, of course. Without Taigi. Because screw Taigi. He doesn't deserve to be in our friend group. There was a cloudy sky above and a light rain had just poured. The rain had stopped, but the clouds remained. One couldn't expect to see the moon tonight.
てめえとこうなるとはな
人生とは意外であるから面白い。そうではないかね。
Absolutely. Mitori had lost consciousness shortly after I interfered. I brought her to an empty park and let her lie on a bench. On the way, Tamao and I explained our situations to one another. Tamao's actions from now on could decide Mitori's fate, so I had to be prepared for the worst.
タマオが現れてくれたのは正直複雑な気分だよ。今となっては君たちの助けを借りるのも難しくなってしまった。
オンスロートだっけさっきの成田の話が本当ならそうなるよな。
大義から聞いた。嘘はない。
お前よくあんなやつそこまで信用するよな。頭悪いんじゃねえのま、俺の知ったこっちゃねえか。悪いが、今の話を聞かなかったとしても、俺はやっぱりお前にとっちゃ役札だぜ。
それは、タマオがこの場にいる理由は、黒船の命令でも、策の指示でもない、という意味かね。
I mean, Tamao's always kind of done her own thing. I mean, not only does her family have their own motivations, but she has her own motivations as well. Usually one of those will cause her to do something. In that case, I could guess why she was here. If she hadn't been ordered by Saku, there was only one possibility left.
話が早すぎて帰ってめんどくさいんだよ。
Based on her behavior, I'd already known her true nature, and that she'd been hiding it from the other crowns. But why? It could either be because she didn't want to reveal her identity for personal reasons, or because she couldn't do that because of who she worked for. It was obvious which one applied in Tamao's case.
それじゃあミトリは始末する。
Tamao declared that she would dispose of her friend as casually as she would talk about the weather.
玉を。それが君の本来の顔か。
Yeah, Tamao was literally the one stopping us from killing people like frickin' Kurafune before. Don't think I've forgotten your route. I remember it very well. Well, I say that, but you know, I don't have a great memory, so I remember bits for sure. But I do remember that she like wanted us not to kill people, which is ironic coming from her. I faced her head on. There were 3 meters between us. A single step would put us in fighting distance. We glared at each other from a distance where we would be close enough from it, where we were close from endangering each other's lives. 3 days had passed since the battle at the mountains. Not all my wounds had healed, but if we were to go all out, Tamao wasn't to be underestimated.
大義のやつを信用するって言ったのはお前だ。なら、分かってんだろ。
Yes, there was 2 important things to remember about Onslaught
オ
Syndrome.
ンスロートを治療する方法はない。そして接触した HMI もまた 30% を超える超高確率でオンスロートを発症する。
Basically, Onslaught Syndrome was infectious, so really, it made sense that Kurofune wasn't dispatching HMIs to deal with the matter. Even if Saku could save Mitori, the very encounter would come with the risk of creating more Onslaught Syndrome cases. In fact, Tamao and I might have been infected already. I felt like I heard a silent clatter.
そこをどけよ。
Her cold words made me face her
それ
again.
はスクールのためか。
俺がそんな善人に見えるか？
Kind of. Sometimes. Well, for lack of a better word, Tamao was an ally of justice. She wasn't doing it for the Academy or Order. She'd deny it herself, but she was actually here out of consideration for her friend. She chased after her disappeared friend, and upon seeing the tragedy Mitori had become, she quickly chose to bring down her fist. That was to prevent any further tragedies and to keep Mitori's soul clean. Tamao was the person who did what was necessary. When necessary, there was no better words to describe her.
君の立場が何者であっても、赤人玉緒は善悪の真実の何たるかを知っている人間だ。と、私は思う。
はあ？何言ってんだバカ！俺をバカにしてんじゃねえぞ！
Oh, Tamao, I missed you getting so defensive all the time. Your route was great. I liked seeing her like super vulnerable all the time.
バカを2度続けて使うのはボキャブラリーに難ありとしか言えないな。
うっせえ！そんな話はしてねえだろ！
Tamao became all red. I think she already was red, but sure. Her honesty was as charming as always. A part of me wanted to enjoy the squirrel-like side of her a bit more, but I had to focus on Mitori now.
まだ方法はあるかもしれない。
あるなら、時の先生がやらないわけはねえよ。
Tokuro Yomase, one of the world's greatest authorities on HMIs, ordered Mitori to be disposed of. That alone was proof of how hopeless the situation
ま
was.
だ諦めるのは早い。
Honestly, I just think like Tokino and Kurofune, they just kind of exhort to like the most drastic option right away. I think they're just like, if they got Onslaught Syndrome, they're not going to be like worth my time, right? But it's like, we've already seen there's a few methods to kind of like prevent Onslaught Syndrome or like to kind of help it, I guess. Like either you can take away their halo, right? Or Eru managed to just amplify their love so much that it got rid of it. I mean, it got rid of their halo, I think, too, but...
まだってのいつまで？地獄の釜の蓋が開いてから土下座して許してもらうってか。
万一の時はこの手で決着をつけよう。
Silence fell in the humid post-rain air of the night. Gosh, that would feel so nice to be in that city right now, just feeling that air. It's like, oh, I'm playing like really late at night, so I don't know. I love the nighttime. I don't know about you guys, but I think like night is my favorite time. It's really like quiet, it's peaceful, especially in like a city. It's very relaxing. Even though I wouldn't want to walk around in the city, I just want to like drive through the city, I guess. I don't want to be around like a bunch of people late at night. That's kind of like not great. Usually there's like only like homeless people or like drunk people. It's like, I don't want to be around those kind of people at night. I think that'd be kind of scary. You never know who you're gonna run into. In spite of my words, I was already aware of the coming destruction. If the fatal moment came when Mitori would lose her soul forever, Shinra Narita would have no choice but to end her himself.
お前にやれんのか。
約束しよう。必ずと。成田真理にとって約束とは神聖なもの。命と引き換えでも果たさずにはおられぬものだ。
Honestly, to Narita, like the only things that matter in life are boobs and promises. And I mean, he promised to get revenge, so that's covered in there. Not saying a word, Tamao turned around and walked as if nothing had happened here. Then she turned back for a moment.
こいつくれてやる。
She threw me a smartphone. It was a new model that had come out just this spring, which made it a strange thing for someone as rough as Tamao to have.
正直今回の件は俺の手に余るんだよ。くそ。
Thank you. I'll gladly take this new iPhone.
俺がやれるのは後にも先にも一つっきりだ。
Despite being quite fearless, she was having trouble speaking something.
俺、ミトリの友達で。
That's true, but I wish you would have, like, not tried to kill her.
その
It's
言
kind
葉
of
は
rude.
私が聞いてしまうには尊すぎる。いつかミトリに直接伝えたまえ。
いつか。
きっとその日が来るだろう。
That much was certain. I silently swore that I would make sure of it.
あのな、最後に忠告だ。できれば今渡したそれは使うな。どっちにしたってろくな結果にはならねえ。
Well, dang, how am I supposed to play games on it if I can't use it?
忠告は真摯に受け止めよ
ミトリのことはてめえに預ける。でも本当にもしもの時は。
う。もしもの時など来ないよ。
バカ。お前はいつも調子のいいことしか言わないんだから。
With that, Tamao instantly vanished with the agility of a night hunter. I couldn't just stay here. I had to hide before the Academy's dogs found us. I also needed time to think about how to handle Mitori. I'm just kind of pissed off that she gave us a phone and she told us we can't use it for anything. It was like, I can't play games, you know? Like, what the heck? For a moment, I looked at her face. She was an innocent girl given a terrible fate, and I wanted to save her from it. But how? I put the smartphone Tamao had given me in my upper pocket and carried Mitori on my back. I soon felt her move. I was tense for a moment. What if Mitori wasn't Mitori now?
成田さん。
The voice I heard made all the tenseness escape my body. That was Mitori Kabutoyama's voice. I could recognize it anywhere. I mean, technically your other voice is
玉
her
緒さ
too.
んとのお話聞こえておりました。
Yeah, so if you could stop going crazy, then nobody would be trying to kill you right now.
何も考えずにもうしばらく休んでいたまえ。
She said nothing more, but I could still feel her shiver. I dealt away with my hideout, but I had no trouble finding another good place to hide. Okushima was a rural area with just a little over 200,000 people. I mean, that's a lot, but the area outside of town was sparsely populated, but there was no shortage of abandoned buildings not worth the destruction time and funds. I chose the one that had no neighboring houses and didn't stand out much, and gathered several days' worth of supplies to make it a proper temporary hideout. Silent night. There was enough distance to cover. There was distance to cover, but even with Mitori on my back, it was easy to make it all the way to the destination. Though I had to be careful I wasn't spotted by the Academy's dogs. I'd chosen a hideout that was away from the populated south bank of Tenkawa, not because I wanted to avoid the Academy, but out of fear of the worst case scenario. As things were, it'd only come in a few days' time. The abandoned building had only been emptied recently, and it was in a relatively good state, though it was interesting how quickly the weathering had begun after the owners left. It was far from a pleasant place, but it functioned well enough as a hideout for now. Whatever happened next, it wasn't a place I would stay in for a long time. I lowered Mitori onto the simple bed I'd prepared. 3 days had passed since the battle in the forest, and she was actually in an unexpectedly good state, meaning that the situation was awful. The wounds from the forest had closed, leaving not a single mark. The injuries had been heavy, and you couldn't expect such healing even with her halo. In fact, even the wounds she'd sustained in her fight against Tamao had closed on the way here. Mitori Kawatoyama's onslaught syndrome was progressing. She was becoming more and more inhuman.
ミトリ、気分はどうかね。発作を起こしていたようだが、どこか苦しくはないだろうか。
Hiding my shock and perplexion, I talked as calmly as I could, telling her the truth would only corner her.
ミトリ、
はい。
She was looking around as if she didn't realize that someone was calling her name, but then she quickly made a face I found familiar.
心配していただいてありがとうございます。思考が少しはっきりしなかったのも今は平気。成田さんが迎えに来てくださったおかげかもしれません。
君からそのようなセリフを聞かせてもらえるとは、実に光栄だ。
I instantly knew that her smile was forced. The attack had definitely subsided, but the transformation was taking a toll on both her mind and body. It hurt me how she was trying to keep me from worrying.
眠れるようなら、少しでも眠って体力を回復させた方がいい。
Oh, she probably needs something to eat, too.
お待ちください。
I tried to cover her with the sheets, but she grabbed my hand as I did. There was barely any power in her grip, and it was full of
そ
desperation.
の前に教えてください。
She was thoroughly overwhelmed, yet she made no effort to look away from her problems. The strong nature of her being somehow made my chest tighten so much it
わ
hurt.
かった。
I couldn't resist such an earnest request. I told her the most important bits of what Taigi had told me, adding some of my own deduction.
オンスロート症とは、制御を失ったハローによる肉体の侵食。それが、ミトリの変異の原因だ。その昔、HMI は鬼や天狗、いわゆる人外の魔とされた。真偽はともかく、オンスロート症を発症した HMI は、まさしく人ではなくなってしまう。精神と肉体は不可分だ。肉体が変質すれば、精神もまた影響を受ける。
どうなるのですか？
Even in this dark room, I could tell that her face was pale. Even so, she wanted to hear it.
文字通り、怪物化する。オンスロートは、現れるたびに甚大な被害をもたらした。それは、根本的に人間では太刀打ちできない怪物だ。危険度では、スライダーをはるかにしのぐ。
その上感染すると。
I honestly didn't want to tell her this, but she'd heard me talk to Tamao, so there's no point in hiding
オン
it.
スロートと接触したものだけが危険なわけではない。人間以外に変質してしまうかもしれない恐怖。オンスロート症の存在を知るだけで HMI は不安定化し、発症のリスクが高まってしまう。
It was an epidemic that lived in memes. What? It's an epidemic that lives in memes. Okay, that was not what I expected to read. That was the reason why Taigi hadn't talked before the very end, and why the Academy was doing so much to hide its existence.
だからこそスクールはオンスロート化の兆候が見えた HMI を例外なく処理、つまり間引きしてきた。
だから私が狙われた。
Yep, because you were going crazy and couldn't control yourself.
でもそれなら私のせいで成田さんや玉尾さんまでどうにかなってしまったら、そんなことになったら。
Mitori put her hand against her chest and clenched it so hard it became pale. She was probably thinking that it was the best for her to just disappear, but
私や玉尾のことは気にしなくていい。
でも
私も玉尾も自らの意志で選択し行った。どんな結果になろうと、すべては己の問題だ。それに今のところ発症している様子はない。リスクが高くなると言っても せいぜい3割程度。10人に7人は平気ということではないかね。
はい。
Yeah, I wouldn't think Narita would get it. I think he has a very strong sense of self. She didn't seem fully convinced, but she nodded regardless.
重要なのはオンスロートがどれだけ危険かよりもどうすれば治療できるかだ。
でも、治療法はないと。
I mean, not that we know of.
夜店時野になくても地上のどこにも存在しないとは決まっていないだろ
はい。そうですね。
Her smile was like the dying flame of a candle, and it made me profoundly
う。
sad.
私の家にはオンスロートらしき伝承が残されていた。オンスロートが古くから存在するものならこれまでに何らかの対策があったかもしれない。
成田さんは後天性型だと伺っていましたけれど、ご実家には先天性の家系のような言い伝えが残されているのですか？
しまったか。
I wanted to give her hope and spoke something that broke my cover. No matter what, there's no need to hide it from her now.
私はとある古い一族の出身でね。古い伝承によれば時折真意の力を持った者が現れたらしい。いわゆる先天性型の家系だったのだろう。私の代にはすっかり血も薄れていたが。
It wasn't a story about Narita, but a family now long lost. The Mikudos, as they were called, were said to sometimes produce inhuman people. I didn't know the actual truth, but when we were young, me and my sister just accepted it without questioning. The Mikudos were gone. Kurofune Genma and the three traitors had consigned my parents, my dear sister, and every other member of the family into the fire. I'd been meant to die as well, but by some miracle I'd survived and made it back here. Driven by hate and rage, I'd returned to have my revenge.
黒船、必ず貴様のところまで行く。お前たち全員にふさわしい最後をくれてやる。
成田さん、どうかされまして？
Oh, nothing. Just planning the revenge of my family that all burned in a fire, except for my sister, who's crazy and is being locked away inside the plant. You know, nothing major. I'm good. I'm chill.
何がかね。
とても怖い顔。
That's just my normal face, but I'm glad you feel that way. Thank you for telling me. Mitori looked at me with worry. Before I realized it, I was clenching my fist so hard it was bleeding, so I could only guess how awful my expression was. How pitiful of me to make Mitori worry more than she had to.
すまない。故郷にはあまり良い思い出がないものだからね。
My response made Mitori giggle.
何かおかしなことを言っただろうか。
そうではなくて、あなたがそんな殊勝な顔で謝罪されるところを初めて見た気がしますわ。
I feel like she's saying that you were actually sincere in your feelings for once.
そうだろうか。自分では常に慎み深く振る舞っているつもりなのだが。
I mean, literally your whole name and existence is a lie. If she had heard that, she would probably.
今世紀最強のジョークを聞かされました。ははは。
Ishia, you're the best. Say something like that. Where has she been? What's she doing?
お嫌いですか？
Oh yeah, because she got hit by those missiles, and then we never ended up seeing what happened to her. Is she alive? Just thought about that. I can't believe I forgot about Best Girl there for a second. As I considered philosophical questions, Mitori asked that. The moonlight coming from between the curtains gave her a bluish tint. For some reason, the sight reminded me of the side profile of my mother.
好きや嫌いの問題ではないのだよ。私の故郷はなくなってしまった。
それは、ごめんなさい。
気にしないでほしい。ずっと以前のとうに終わってしまったことだ。だが、私は忘れない。誰が忘れても 手を下した罪人どもが忘却の彼方に捨て去ったとしても。
What was lost couldn't come back, and the dead couldn't return, yet the scoundrels were still alive. Was that tolerable? No.
復讐を果たせ。成田真理。
Even if that led to me expiring, I wouldn't fear it. Shinrin Narita was a wraith, a mere shade of the past that had come back to haunt those who wronged him.
でも成田さん、どれだけ変わってしまっても故郷は変わりなくここにありますわ。
Mitori put her hand on her chest.
やがて豊満へ至る胸の膨らみ。
心。故郷とは土地で
I'm
も
so glad she ignored him right
人で
there.
もありません。いいことも悪いこともそこであったすべてが今の自分へ続いて支えている。
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that. I feel like, for me, family isn't just those people who are like blood related to me, but those people like that are closest to me, right? So if you have like a good friend, like they are family.
あなたも私もきっと故郷の一部なのですわ。そうやって故郷というものは続いていくのでしょう。
人は死ぬ。記憶は色あせ、語り継ぐ者もいなくなる。この地上の一切は結局幻のように溶け去って、後には糸の一切れも残りはしない。
弱気みたいに聞こえますわよ。あなたらしくもない。
I reached down and traced my fingers on her face. It wasn't done consciously. Her skin was fatigued yet still charming and warm. Her jawline was even more dainty and fragile than I
命
imagined.
とは刹那の光だ。まばゆく燃えて消え去る。ほんの一瞬の花だよ。
それならなおさら消えるまでは精一杯生きなければなりませんわね。
君にそんな日が来るとしても先の話だろう。まずは体を治さなければな。
そうですわね。自分が弱気になってはいけませんわ。
She said that as though speaking to herself. She was faced with a hopeless future and a promised death, yet she was doing her best to act as natural as possible out of consideration for me. Was this strength of someone who had accepted fate? Mitori had dreams and hopes. Those things were about to be taken away from her despite doing nothing wrong.
今夜はもう遅い。話の続きはまた明日にしよう。眠れなくてもせめて横になっていた方がいい。
I mean, is the plan still to take her to Saku or what?
そうします。おやすみなさい。
I'm really confused. Like, what are we doing? Mitori was fast asleep soon as she lied down. Her face was pure, free of all pain, yet she didn't have much time left. Rage at whoever gave her this fate had begun gathering within me. Careful not to wake her up, I took a deep breath and let the heat out. Shinya Narita was familiar with this mental state. I had seen many people die in my life. Valuable deaths, meaningless deaths, sudden deaths, even deaths dealt by my own hand. That's why I knew what I had to do. Instead of lamenting, I would chase after the faint possibility, for there was nothing to gain from standing still. Tokuno Yomase was the greatest authority on HMI research. If she had no means of treating this, then it was fair to call it incurable. What would I do then? Mitori's onslaught syndrome was still progressing. I had to at least stop it from becoming worse. It would have been better to move to a place with better equipment that would definitely attract the Academy's attention.
必ず見つける。
I would arrange my thoughts and think about what to do next at dawn. For now, I would merely rest.
わーいと。ね。たらた。
I harmonized my body and mind using the breathing gap before taking a light nap. As a result of all my training, I was on high alert even when sleeping. If enemies drew near, I would wake right away. After some time, I felt movement in the room. It was still dark and there was time left until dawn. There was no hostility in the presence, so my awakening was mild, like I was floating up from water. I slightly opened my eyes and saw Mitori within the moonlight coming through the window. She was looking away. Her upper clothing was rustled, so I saw her slender pale back.
成田さん、起きておられるのでしたら、手伝っていただけませんこと？
Oh, help you with what? Oh dear, she realized I was awake. Wait, this was surely due to her physical area halo of the Tempest 7. She must have noticed the awakening-related changes involved in awakening. Even if I could control my body using Gap's methods, it was difficult to hide from her sight.
干渉についてはいいのかね。私としてはこのまま眺めているのは大いに賛成だが。
今夜だけは特別に許します。
Well, okay then. As told, I helped her out.
体汚れたままでは寝苦しくて。
I prepared water, a container, and a towel. She was of a good upbringing, yet it was all I could give her were these modest and plain items, in an abandoned house no one could live in. I used a wet towel to wash her side to side. I felt like I was dealing with glass that would shatter if I used too much strength. Being as careful as possible, I thoroughly cleaned her pale skin. The past 3 days, Mitori had been unconscious or wandering Okushima. I had trouble finding her because she hadn't stayed in one place. 3 days might have seemed long enough in the world of hygiene, but the sweat and filth on her wasn't too bad. Her cool skin was pleasant to the touch too. From her slender arms to her sloping shoulders, from her bewitching back to her promising breast. Gosh, I just feel weird whenever I have to say that word. Oh my gosh. And then I just read the next sentence. Refined hips, wonderful breast, unexpected plump behind, breast, long legs, breast. Game, why do you do this?
胸ばかりきれいにしなくても。
Whoa. She looked fatigued overall, but the line of her small but yet beautiful breast was a work of art that didn't lose any of its value.
胸はとても重要な場所なのだよ。
こんな
So
時
they
な
are,
の
I guess.
本当に成田さんらしいですわね。
Mitori quickly put on her upper clothing, giving a sad goodbye to her chest. I prepared to put away the towel, but then...
何ですの？
Still facing away from me, Mitori put her hand on mine, though it was more like she was grabbing it.
君にしては大胆だ。
触れているのが？それとも女の方からこんな真似をするのは殿方がどう思われているのか知りませんが、女にだって異性を求める時くらいはありますわ。
As though merely touching me wasn't enough.
積極的な乙女も愛おしいものだよ。異なる花では美しさも違う。バラの気高さと月見草のつつましさを比べるのは物を知らない愚か者だけだ。
Making the maiden do all the work was rude, so I embraced her back.
覚えていてください。
The prayer-like whisper escaping her mouth gouged my heart like the sharpest blade.
私のことを、ここにいたことを、あなたの小さな片隅で構いませんわ。きっと覚えていてください。
Was she saying that because this was the journey's end? Did she want to, at the very least, leave the proof of her existence within someone? If there was no way to tell the tale, memories became nothing but untouchable information. Even if the overwhelming flow of time eventually washed them all away, people never stopped trying to cling to their memories and pass them on. It was like a bit of futile resistance against the speed of the world.
君は HMI だろう。人の可能性と呼ばれるものが自らの可能性を手放してどうする。命ある限り立ち向かえ。
Fight, despair, hardship, resignation, fate. Keep on resisting the overwhelming speed of the world. The possibility was there for as long as you were alive.
私はそうしてこの国に舞い戻った。
それなら、そう思える力をください。
君は よく似ているな。
それはどなたに？
Mitori's pale face was somewhat reminiscent of my mother as she was in my distant memories. My mother was a sad person. She spent most of her time at the corner of the large old mansion, barely talking to my father, and almost always all alone. Even as a clueless child, I could tell she wasn't a Mikado by choice. In spite of that, she was a true mother. There's something I'll tell you once you're older. A few days before it all became ash, she'd call me to her room, which was quite a rarity, and said that, after putting her hand on my head, "But please love your sister." No, not after what she did, no. Those were the last words that Shinsui Mikado had heard her say. Whatever she wanted to tell me burned up and died with her. And I hadn't fulfilled my last promise to her.
君はやはり君だよ、ミトリ。
Cruelty, contradiction, tragedy. Mitori accepted it all, and that was nothing but a feature she shared with my mother.
私は君を守ってみせる。
The feeling I'd forgotten over those 7 years of seeking vengeance had come back to me. Mitori's willingness to accept fate had made blood run through my soul, which had been sullied by rage and vengeance. There was small warmth gathering in my arid wasteland of a heart, but I found it oh so dear. The rage didn't abate, and my curse and hate couldn't be dispelled. Vengeance was a part of Shinrin Narita, and it was something that had to be achieved no matter what. But now, if this life of mine wouldn't burn up and expire once vengeance was mine, if it had a future, I wanted to have Mitori for myself, not just as a memory, but someone to live this life with, even though I knew it was a desire that didn't suit me. It was brazen of me to have this wish. I'd caused much bloodshed, taken many lives, and created a lot of destruction. With my hands so stained, it was purely sinful for me to wish for peaceful days. A day where many sins would give me the appropriate punishment, but until then, I would live my life to the fullest. Putting it into words was vexing. I gave her a kiss as soft as a feather's touch.
ミトリ、君は美しい。
That was a trite sentence, but the real thing required no exaggeration.
このような場での男のざれ言は信じてはいけないと教わっておりますから。
お母上からかね。実にできた方だ。
高崎さんからですわ。
Yeah, that sounds right. Haru Takazaki, clearly a person one couldn't underestimate. Despite what Mitori said with her mouth, her wet eyes told me that she wanted for us to become even closer. The future was uncertain, but her wish for the moment was clear. She was clinging to me as though to hold on to the slim bond and forget how faint the hope
愛
was.
しているよ。
Oh, okay. Narita. I told her what I had yet to say.
知っておりました。
Oh, and she knows. Okay, okay. She smiled as though victorious. She claimed that in these relationships, the ones to fall in love first with the losers, and now I couldn't help but feel that these sages were right. Love is War. Great show. Frickin', I'm so excited. Season 3 is almost out. Let's go. Kind of sad there was no CG there. I kind of feel like there was supposed to be. Like maybe they had like made love or something and they just didn't show it, but... Oh. Yeah, so they definitely did just cut it out. Okay. After the deed, we washed our bodies with towel again before changing our clothes. There was no trace of the sweet lewdness from before, but there were faint remnants of warmth on our skins. The sky above Okushima was full of stars, and the light of the nigh full moon was soothing my heated body and heart.
私、みんなよりも一足早く
ふむ。奥ゆかしさこそ日本語の美しさだね。
でも、おとなしさんたちにはもう会うこともできませんけれど。
時間はある。治った後でいくらでも会えばいい。
Yeah, that's if Kurofune and them like still don't try to kill us.
そうですわね。
The moonlight shone on her as she smiled. She was like a battered pilgrim walking through a wasteland, yet not giving up on the final bit of hope.
成田さんが約束してくださるのでしょう。
君を守るというのであれば。
玉尾さんとのお話聞いておりましたのよ。
That can only mean that she was talking about my promise to dispose of Mitori if all hope was lost.
これは私がまだ幼くて何も上手にできなかった頃、 宇藤の先生が初めての褒め言葉と一緒にくださいました。
She handed me the fan she'd always used.
私は兜山みとりです。誇りまでなくしてしまうのは耐えられない。自分が他の何かになってしまうぐらいなら、魂まで汚されてしまうのなら。
She'd gathered her resolve and handed me the fan. I most certainly couldn't accept it yet.
思考して希望せよ。
存じておりますわ。デュマですのね。
どんな時でも希望を失ってはならない。虹の果てを目指すなら、まず信じて歩き出すことだ。
虹？
虹の果てを見てみたいと幼なじみと語らって、家を抜け出して探しに行ったバカ者がいてね。
I wonder who he could be talking about here.
それでどうなりましたの？
山一つ越えても虹ははるかに遠かった。二つ目を目指したところであっさりと見張りに連れ戻された。
Yeah, sounds like something that would happen.
その土地はひどく閉鎖的で、子供どころかほとんどの者は外へ出ることを許されていなかったのだよ。
結局
今の私は虹に果てなどないと知っている。それでも追いかけて走り出すことに何の矛盾があるだろう。これまでに多くの者が虹を追ったのだろう。これからも多くの者が追うのだろう。君も最後まで歩むのを止めるな。それがどれほど険しい道であっても。力尽きた時にはこの私が後のすべてを引き受けよう。
あなたはこんな時まで受け入れて死ぬ安らぎではなく、最後まであがいて破れる無様を選べと、そうおっしゃいますのね。
Yeah, have some hope. Oh my gosh. Like, we're gonna save you, obviously.
傲慢で尊大で残酷で身勝手で、でもそんなあなただから。
I mean, considering they just slept together, could she not be a little bit nicer to him? Silence returned. The beautiful moon above, indifferent to all the filth below, watched over the brief show woven by mankind with a detached
で
gaze.
も万に一つ希望を手にできたとしても、その時の私はあなたの敵になりますわ。
Those sneaky words pierced my heart like a knife. Had she realized the reason why Shin and Narita had come to the academy?
成田さんの敵はどなたですの？
Those with flat chests.
どうしてわかったのかね。
There was no real shock in this. Strangely enough, it somewhat made sense that she would realize. There were pieces of the puzzle all over, though. It was surprising how quickly she put them together.
これだけ一緒にいたのですもの。見当ぐらいはつきます。ずっとあなたを見ておりましたから。
私はこの怒りを憎悪を果たすために舞い戻った。奴らが忘れても死者は眠らないのだと知らしめるために。私は黒船に、そして残る二人の裏切り者に呪われた最後をくれてやるだろう。奴らのムクロを。
そうですか。あなたはスクールにあだなすものならば、兜山みとりはきっとそれを阻みます。
But yeah, that's what we tell every girl, or that's what every girl tells us, but then we always end up with them in the end, so... This wasn't surprising either. It was actually somewhat sad how easy it was for me to accept. Mitori and I were alike. We couldn't change our ways of life no matter what. That was why we would be ourselves until the bitter
理
end.
事長の過去に何があるとしても、スクールがどんな秘密を隠しているとしても、あそこにはおとなしさんがいます。過ちがあるなら必ず正してくれる。時間はかかるかもしれません。でもいつかきっと。
信じているのだね。
私、おとなしさんと戦ったことがありますのよ。
それは初耳だ。
その頃の私は今よりもずっと未熟で、他人を認めることも知らない小娘で、音無さんは筆頭にふさわしい人間ではないと、そんなことを考えて。
Yeah, and I bet you got humbled pretty quick, huh? The way she spoke made me feel like she was merely looking back at the event, not relaying it to me. I silently urged her to continue.
一矢報いるどころか、本当に手も足も出ず、気がつけばリビングの床に倒れていました。音無さんが手加減していなければ、その場で命を落としていたかもしれない。あれはなんて優しい夏の夢だろう。
She squinted her eyes in joy. Based on what she was saying, I could only guess that.
破れたのが嬉しかったのかね。
生まれて初めて完膚なきまでに負けました。ただの砂鉄ではありません。己の力の届かないものがあるという事実を思い知らされたのです。
So that defeat must have been what made her recognize others for the first
彼
time.
女は音無作は己のみを世界と思い込む HMI の愚昧に絶対の他者というあり方をもたらすもの。己で世界を塗り替えようという HMI の傲慢を一振りで打ち砕く。だからこそ音無作だけがこのスクールのただ一つの星足り得るのです。それからのことは些細なことまで、どれもこれも忘れがたい思い出。私は音無作を信じておりますから、あなたがスクールにあだなすというのなら、私の愛する人たちを守るために私は最後まで立ちはだかるでしょう。
You know, like, I agree with her conviction about protecting the Academy. I agree with, like, her reasoning behind it. But the Academy literally tried to kill you, okay? Like, what do you mean? I mean, to be fair, Tamao also tried to kill you, but still, the Academy tried to blow you up with a helicopter, they tried to shoot you, they tried to send Taigi after you, like, do you really like the Academy? I mean, I think you like the school, you don't really care about the leadership of the school, you like the environment. Like, let's get this correct here. She could only live one way, and she would live that way until the end. Her soul was so bright it made her squint.
君の信じる道を行きたまえ。
In that case, there was only one thing for Shinra Narita to do. I'd protect Mitori Kabutoyama until the end, no matter what it would bring. I wish they would give us like a CG in here. They never gave us one. I think there might have been one, but it was like in that scene that they probably had to delete. Mitori soon went to sleep as though she lost consciousness, and I couldn't believe that it was just because of fatigue. She was trying to act normal, but her body was already far beyond that point. Even when I touched her, she felt different from a human. The onslaught syndrome was progressing by the second. Under normal circumstances, she would have already been far beyond the point of no return. According to what Taigi had told me, there had never been a case for regaining their sanity after succumbing to onslaught syndrome. Mitori had already come back from the onslaught syndrome state thrice, on the first night, in the forest and against Tamao. Though I didn't know what was responsible for supporting her, the power of my halo or her own ability to control her bodily functions. It was miraculous that she was still even conscious. Would she expire like this? No, certainly not. What came at the end of Onslaught Syndrome wasn't death, but transformation. Mitori Kabutoyama was becoming something beyond human. She didn't have much time left. I waited until daybreak and made my move.
ミトリ、この隠れ家の外には出ないよう、必要になりそうなものは全て用意してある。
Still lying on the basic bed, she watched as I finished preparing. She was in an even worse state than last night, and it must have been difficult to get up. In her case, that meant it was becoming more difficult to control her
万
halo.
一の場合は、この携帯を使いたまえ。ボタン一つで私の端末までメールが送られるようにしてある。
Oh, did you give her the new phone?
成田さん、どちらへ？
I thought she would feel uneasy if left alone, but she didn't show it, and it and made the best smile she could. The consideration pierced my
君
heart.
を救う手がかりを追う
I would search for the last hope, the cure for Onslaught syndrome. It was an absurd endeavor, much like trying to find a single piece of cloth in a desert, but I was the one who told her to keep fighting, so I couldn't allow myself to stop. I was worried about leaving her all alone myself, but I was the only one who could still operate. If I stayed with her, we could only curse the footsteps of the coming fate, while indulging in whatever little consolation we had. The important thing to do now is to keep moving forward. Okay, so I think I'm gonna end here. Like, I thought about ending at the little other cutscene. I was waiting to, like, I don't know, get like some kind of CG or something. I like to use a CG for my thumbnail, right? But we haven't gotten any, so I was kind of disappointed in that. But there was some good moments right there. I really liked how they were becoming closer, and they were like introducing, like, you know, the romance of this route. I was wondering when they were gonna do that, if ever, just because she keeps going insane on us. But I like where they're going. They're like trying to find a cure for her, and you know, he's in love with her. I'm hoping they'll just kind of focus on that rather than Narita trying to get revenge or anything like crazy. I think it's going really well so far. I like the route. I wish there was a little bit less like flashbacks and stuff. I mean, there's just a lot. I mean, they're giving us a lot of good information stuff, but I like the moment where they're actually focusing on them and like moving forward, and you know, like developing a relationship, a bond, right? I like that moment a lot. That was good. So I don't know if next episode will be the last. I have no idea how much longer we have in the route. So there'll either be probably like 1 or 2 more episodes, I would imagine. Hopefully there will be some good stuff. I want to find a cure for her and see how that goes. I want to see how they wrap up this route. And then we're going to be doing the true end. Oh, so excited. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. And you guys have a good one.